Welcome, everybody, to a brand new episode of the Evil Safety Dudes. I am your host, Mr. Aaron Icino, the Director of Risk Management for IBC. And this is our podcast where we get to talk about anything and everything that has to do with safety and risk. If it's a risk to a person at home, on the job, to a state, full of people, to a people group, to a nation, people, whatever risks there are out there to humans around the world, we're going to talk about it on this show. And this is episode 199. As always, everybody, please remember to like, rate, subscribe, share, and leave a positive review wherever you're watching or listening to this podcast from. All right, everybody. Well, we have a very special guest for you. We got a very serious topic that's kind of overdue on our podcast. I'm a little ashamed that, we're just getting around to the subject at 199 because this definitely is a risk to us. So I'm going to bring in our guest, Robin Schawe. How are you doing?
I'm great. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Now grade me. How did I do on the last name?
You did great. You did
Okay,
really
cool.
well.
All right, I try my best because I have one of those names that nobody could say, and I know what that's like. So I always try to nail them, and I don't always. So,
You did great today.
well, thank you. So you are a licensed professional counselor, a licensed addiction counselor. You're a zero suicide coordinator for a hospital in Colorado Springs. You're a QPR certified trainer. Wow. So a lot of heavy stuff going on here.
Yes.
And our topic today is suicide prevention, and I want to talk about it in the traditional sense, as far as friends, family, coworkers, people in our lives. I want to try to get it occupational if we can too, because I don't really hear that addressed a lot. It's like, what can employers do? Because I know you're going to give us good information. What can a friend do? What can a mom do? What can a dad do? But what can an employer do? Because some employers have had employees commit suicide, and they've just felt so helpless and lost. And suicide has even hit our show, the Evil Safety Dudes. About 100 episodes ago, we had a guest on, and it was a good show. I'd never met him in person. He was just a colleague, another professional in the field, fire EMS guy. Had him on. We had a good podcast. And it was about, I don't know, 6 months later. So I got a call from his friend, said, I don't know if you know this, but this gentleman had committed suicide. And I just thought you should know. And
Yeah.
I didn't know. I had no idea. I mean, he lived several states away. I didn't know him personally. So, but it hit me. I was like, wow. I mean, I wasn't just talking to him, but I mean, I had an hour-long conversation with this person, and now he's gone. So it's hit
That's
our
sad.
show as well. But let's get into your origin stories a little bit. So, why did you choose to specialize in this topic, in suicide?
Well, it wasn't my first choice. I started as a school counselor, absolutely loved it. But a lot of our kids out there are struggling with suicidal thoughts and mental health. And after being in the schools for 14 years, I felt like I wasn't doing enough for them and opted to go into the community realm. Ended up as a co-responder on one of our first co-responder units in Colorado Springs. And after 3 back surgeries, couldn't take riding in a police car anymore and came back into the
Oh,
hospital and fell in love with this position. Um, People don't look at the lens of suicide through the eyes of somebody who's suicidal. And most people think it's a very selfish act and that the individual should do more to make their families feel better. And that's not the point at all. When somebody gets to the point of suicide, it's like they have goggles on and they can't see past what's happening to them in the moment. And we need to be fighting for them. We need to be doing more for them. And I fell in love with it.
wow. So you were in the school system for 14 years.
Yes,
Wow. And in the was it middle school, high school? What was it?
both. I was in
Okay.
middle school and high school.
Okay. And just from your experience, was suicidal ideations kind of a thing? Was it something you found yourself dealing with?
We were always told as school counselors not to talk about it because we would force a student to think about it and do it. So we were always told to put it on the back burner and focus on other things. But what we now know through a lot of research is that talking to somebody about suicide will not put the idea in their head. It's either already there or it's not going to force it to be there. So talk about it. We need to break the stigma around suicide and open up about it. And that way we're going to save a lot more lives.
For sure, for sure. I know sometimes that the public school system could be pretty tough on the kiddos. It could be pretty harsh environments. I worked in behavioral health for 10 years in the locked psych wards
Okay.
with adolescents. And so anytime a kid said something like, I want to kill myself, 4 years old or to 19 sometimes, they would end up on our unit if they were serious or not, because you got to take it seriously. So I worked a lot with suicidal teens or just, kind of crying out and saying those drastic things. And I had two patients out of about, I don't know how many, 10,000, how many you take care of in 10 years, actually get out and commit suicide. And
Yeah.
it affected me because I had personally worked with them as a nurse. One female had a broken arm. And so as the nurse, I had to do like a lot of her exercises with her every single day. So, I'm like personally, like physically touching, we're working together every day and you develop a therapeutic rapport. And man, I thought like this is our star pupil. Everybody did because they came in, angry at the world and wanted to kill themselves. Within a month or two, they were bright and happy and doing everything and just perfect model kids, and then get out and kill themselves. And it was such a crazy kind of eye opener to me that like, wow, we couldn't see this coming. The psychiatrists, the psychologists, the counselors, the nurses, the mental health techs, like none of us thought that this was going to happen with these
Yeah.
two. And then it did. And it kind of made me feel a little helpless, like, man. Um, so, suicide has been part of my professional career, for a
Yeah.
while. And so, I'm glad that you're coming on, and I want to get some tips from you. So, you talk about the stigma that it has, and people don't want to talk about it, but you're saying that go for it, talk about it.
Absolutely. Number one mistake that we all make is that when we talk about suicide, we use the word commit. And commit has a very negative
Okay.
stigma in society, usually associated with breaking the law, right? She committed a murder, she committed a robbery. It's not against the law to end your life by suicide. So we want to change the verbiage we use. She died by suicide, she ended her life by suicide, and we want to take that negative stigma out of it. The more we talk about it, the more lives we can help save. So that's number one. And number two, anything you see, any red flag, anything that doesn't feel good, don't be afraid to get in there and start asking questions. I think with COVID, everybody pretty much shut down and decided that they needed to mind their own business and not get involved in other people's lives. And that's the exact opposite of what we need to be doing to stop suicide.
So as far as like employers, so I'm on the health and safety side a lot with these big manufacturing plants, huge general contractors, small contractors. I work with all size businesses, but some of these big plants, they have campaigns, drink enough water, hydration challenge, maintain no gain over the holidays. You probably got them all at the hospital.
Yep,
You
sure
got
do.
you got your occupational team there, and they got all these campaigns and stuff. um, does suicide prevention fit into any of that? Is it the employer's business? Is that overstepping? If it's not, is there anything that they could do? I mean, what are your thoughts on employers trying to prevent suicides
It's
in employees?
absolutely the employer's business. The one thing I think a lot of people are afraid of is if that their employer knows what's going on, that they'll get fired. So they keep
Right.
their mouth shut and they don't say anything, especially our first responders. And that is not fair with what they see on a daily basis. But what happened to our peer support teams? having training individuals within our companies on how to be good peer supports, having it be confidential, and having our people be able to talk to somebody about what's going on in their lives. Most companies have EAP programs, but it
Right.
takes months to get into an outside therapist, even if it is covered by EAP. So what happens in the
That's usually
moment?
for drug and alcohol, right? The EAP.
Well, I know for our hospital, it's normal therapy too. So it just depends
Oh,
on your
nice.
company.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah. So just,
So, so
um,
you're, go ahead.
I was going to say, just encouraging your staff to talk about what's happening in their life, to be open about what's happening, and make sure there is no recourse on them for doing that.
So if I'm like on one of these safety committees, right? And say the committee wants to do a suicide prevention week or month, whatever. And they say, well, let's make a poster. We always make a poster. Okay. Messaging, what do I say? Just from listening to you, I've just got an idea. I'm running by you. Tell me good, bad, B plus, B minus. It's okay to talk about suicide, or we have help here if you're having suicidal thoughts. Talk to this person. Here's the number. Like, would that messaging be okay?
Absolutely. Be blunt, be out there. So many people try to be so nonchalant. When we're talking about suicide, we need to use the words. Are you having suicidal thoughts? Are you wanting to kill yourself? We need to get out there and get in their face so that they know it's okay to have those conversations.
And then as far as the bigger corporations that can handle, another salary on the payroll, do you suggest like them getting someone like you or like some sort of counseling, because I know there's this big thing right now called like mental health first aid. Like you got your first aid, but then you got your mental health first aid. So do you think we should assign it to someone or bring someone in, or is it hire a third party that you could just call like an EAP? What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely get the training in your corporations, but for someone like me, I offer it free to community members.
Oh, wow.
Call me. I'm happy to train your corporation for you virtually. I mean, if you're in another state, obviously I can't come to you physically, but we can do it virtually. Community partners. We in El Paso County for Colorado, we have all kinds of partners. Myself and a partner teach mental health first aid. We go to the community and we offer it for free. We just did a search and rescue team 2 weekends ago that had asked
Wow.
for a mental health first aid completely free.
Wow.
Partner with
So
your communities.
so I brought up mental health first aid, and you're obviously aware of it because you're teaching the course, yeah?
Yes,
So
correct.
can you just touch base just quick on what that is?
Absolutely. It's the basics of what mental health is. Different diagnosis, how people act, why you don't need to be afraid of different people, and how to be person centered around it. Oftentimes, when people are talking about somebody who's diagnosed, for example, they'll say, oh, Susie is schizophrenic. Well, it's true that Susie might be diagnosed with schizophrenia, but that's not who she is. Let's
Okay.
treat her like a human being. Let's give her respect and help her with her challenges instead of putting her down. So, just being more open to what mental health is and breaking that stigma against that as well.
Awesome. Awesome. So mental health first aid courses. Now, if I'm the boss and I want to implement a mental health first aid program, who do I send to go through those courses?
Everybody in your corporation, from
Okay.
the CEO all the way down to anybody else, for the hospital, like we have mailroom, we have environmental services, we have food services. We give that opportunity to absolutely everybody in the hospital that wants to go through that and through QPR, which is question, persuade, refer, which is a suicide prevention training.
Definitely. And I want to get into that. Couple more questions on the mental health first aid. So a lot of corporations, they have internal first response team for medical stuff. So these would be volunteers who usually they're bringing me in to train, and they're getting first aid, CPR, AED. They're getting a little field medicine course. We're getting them some cool jump bags that could take right to the injured person with a bunch of cool gear, teach them how to use it, all that fun stuff, bloodborne pathogens, all that. Um, would these folks be good to get that? Or is it like you don't even need to be in that medical realm? It could be a different group who maybe has more wants to volunteer for that, because it's two sets of people. I mean, it doesn't have to be one person could do both, but I'm thinking if I was asking for volunteers for a medical first response team or volunteers for a mental health response team, I think I would get different sets of people.
It probably just depends on who's in your organization and who you feel like would respond well to that. If there is somebody that has a huge stereotype and doesn't do well with mental health, I probably would not put them in charge of that team. But if we are in reality, medical issues and mental health issues all take place in the very same body. It just involves the brain. So
Right.
whoever is passionate about it, people with lived experience, we always talk about in the hospital system, we ask for people with lived experience to come help us because they've either been through it with family or maybe they've dealt with it themselves and they know what to do and how to do it. So it's really just up to each organization.
Okay. Awesome. So you mentioned QPR. Can you define that one more time for us?
Yes, question, persuade, refer. It's almost like CPR for mental health.
I got you. So instead of CPR, we got QPR.
Yep.
And then is this what course are they getting trained in QPR?
That is the exact course. It's called Question, Persuade, Refer. It depending on who teaches it, it can go anywhere from an hour to a couple hours. Here in the hospital, our staff don't have a lot of time, so we have it down to a 1 hour training. But depending on participation, it can go longer. And if they want role playing involved, that can go longer as well.
Is QPR a part of mental health first aid or is that separate?
It's separate.
Okay. So let's say we have a mental health first aid team and we want to even beef that up further. Let's say we were in our safety committee meeting, we decided to do the suicide prevention campaign, and we found QPR. We're like, we want to add this. Let's make sense to train our mental health team. So they could get a hold of someone like you or somebody else that offers it. They could get these courses. And then are they learning how to do each one of those letters in the acronym? Is that what's
Abs-
going on here?
Absolutely. So the first thing that we teach about is statistics. Why is it so important for suicide prevention? Because of how high the suicide rates are right now. We teach about the different myths and facts around suicide just to dispel those myths. And then we go into what are we looking for? Not just verbal cues, because we have direct and indirect verbal cues, but what about behavioral clues or situational clues that maybe they're not saying a word, but they're acting completely different than normal? How come we're not stopping and questioning? This is your coworker who's always on time to work, does a great job, and now they're starting to show up late. They're not showing up at all. They're not doing their job to their full potential, and yet nobody reaches out. Hey, what's going on? I've noticed these things. Are you okay? Instead, we all mind our own business. And when that
Right.
person dies by suicide, we all act shocked, but we've seen the signs and nobody did anything to help.
I can see that happen in real life. Being a staff nurse for so many years, I had a bad experience one time. I won't mention the name of the hospital, but I was on orientation and I got out of my car in the employee parking lot, and it was pretty cold out. I'm in Iowa, and it's wintertime. And I'm walking across the street to go into the employee entrance of the hospital, and I just biffed it. I don't know what happened. I stepped in a hole or something, and I just sprained my ankle. It was one of those really bad sprains. Snap, snap, crackle, crackle, pop, pop, like a bad one. And so I'm on the ground and I'm writhing in pain. I'm in agony. I'm clenching my ankle. As far as I know at this point, it's broken. And this is the when morning shift is starting. And so there's literally like 100 medical people going in. They all parked in the same place. They're all walking across the same street. I'm in the street, and nobody stopped at
No.
all to do anything. And it was like, man, do I want to work here? I'm on orientation. I don't have a lot invested at this point, but I need this job, so I went with it, and I had to go through orientation with my ankle up in the air. But it was like just this crazy situation. I'm like 100 trained medical professionals,
And not one.
licensed, and not one. It was early. Morning shift starts early, 6:30. It's still probably dark. I had my big coat on, my hood's up. So, they could have thought I was a homeless person that could have attacked him. I don't know. I'm trying to give them the benefit of the doubt, but it was just kind of weird. So I could see how people, when they see a red flag or an anomaly or a change in behavior in a coworker, that they could just brush it off. Not my business. Don't want to get involved.
Yeah, absolutely. And I hear from so many people, well, what if nothing's wrong and I piss them off? And my
Right.
answer back to them is, well, they're alive to be pissed off at you. At least you tried and you did not ask something and have them end their life by suicide.
We tell them the same thing on the medical side. There's so many symptoms of a heart attack that, and it could not be a heart attack. Someone could have like indigestion, they could have shoulder pain, jaw pain, you know, they could have fatigue, lethargy. These are legitimate signs and symptoms of a heart attack, but it also could be 20 different things. And
Right?
people are scared to say you need to go get checked out because they don't want to give them that hospital bill. And what if it's nothing? But I give them the same answer that you just gave. Well, at least they're alive to be managing.
Yep, absolutely.
Better to err on the side of caution.
Caution.
All right. So, question. That's the cue.
That's the
And
cue.
can you break down just a couple of those questions one more time? What would be some legitimate questions when we saw like a red flag, something that you guys recommend asking?
Well, let's break down those risk factors first and then
Okay.
why we
Yeah.
want to
Great. Great.
question. So different risk factors could be anywhere from noticing withdrawal from somebody, signs of depression, just getting really quiet, but on that opposite end, any kind of significant change in emotion. So maybe the person's normally really quiet and withdrawn, and now they're happy and making plans and laughing, but in a very short period of time. What
Right.
we've learned is that when an individual decides to end their life by suicide, it's like a burden has been lifted from them and their behavior completely changes. So, any kind of behavioral change in a short period of time, definitely a red flag. Any kind of pulling away from family. We talk about junior high and high school kids a lot. And so if you're noticing your kids are spending a lot more time in their rooms and pulling away from you, and that's not normal for your kid, don't assume it's just a middle school thing. Ask questions,
Right.
right? We don't know
Question.
what's going on.
Yeah, it's
And
good not to assume is what I'm hearing, because it could be something bad like suicide.
absolutely. Overhearing them talking about a plan to end their life, that's the biggest red flag we'll ever get. Whatever you're doing, stop, start asking questions. If there's been
So
a,
let me ask a question on that because it seems like a myth. But what's been said a lot in a lot of the mental health communities is that if someone is talking about suicide, they're the ones that aren't going to do it because they're alerting everybody. It's the people who don't say anything that really, really want to do it because they don't want to get their plan foiled. But what I'm
absolutely,
hearing from you is that's a myth.
that is absolutely a myth. It's one of the myths that we go through, that those who talk about suicide don't do it. They absolutely do try or attempt to kill themselves or end their lives by suicide. So that is an absolute myth. And the one thing we say to that is if there's somebody in your life that's always talking about it, treat each and every time as if it's the first time and you ask the questions every single time. Because it's going to do one of two things. It's either going to let them know that you are a safe person and they will come to you when they need that help. Or if they're not truly suicidal, it's going to teach them the correct verbiage to use to express how they truly are feeling.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. So when we see those risk factors, we just start to investigate. We start to question.
Absolutely. And it's not, you don't necessarily have to come out and say, hey, dude, are you suicidal? You could say, hey, I've noticed a change in your behavior. Is everything okay? Or I noticed you've been coming to work late a lot. Is there anything I can do to help? What's going on? It
Right.
doesn't have to, you can be less direct or more direct, whatever your preference is, because you want to be sincere. So however you normally are, be that way with that individual. Just get to the bottom of whatever's going on in their life.
Definitely. And before we get to P&R, I just wanted to go back to something you said earlier. You mentioned you just got done doing a course for first responders, and it's a heavy job. Paramedics seeing the dead bodies, seeing people close to death, police, same thing, police having to shoot people, firemen seeing the dead
Yeah,
bodies. So, um, from my understanding, statistically, some of those professionals are at higher risk for suicide. Is that accurate?
absolutely. That's accurate. Um, the other profession that's very high for suicide that people don't think about is physicians. They have
Really?
an extremely high suicide rate.
Is it because of stress? Is it because of losing patients?
All of the above,
Okay. All right. As a nurse, we're always like, whatever. The doctor's not doing nothing. We do all the work.
right?
Killing. They're spending like 5 minutes with the patient. We're there on a 12-hour shift, got a total of like 1.5 hours with every patient. Like we're the stressed ones, but no, but yeah, I can imagine because the buck stops with them. They're kind of in charge medically, so I could see how they could take it more personally when something doesn't go well.
Yeah,
Okay, so definitely making sure our first responders that whoever, the city, the hospitals, whoever has first responders, needs to be on top of this. This is what I'm hearing.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay,
I will tell you for the hospital I'm at, when we get a first responder in, we we don't put them in the general area. We make sure we're taking care of them. We are very confidential with them. And here in Colorado, we have an amazing unit up in Denver that takes care of our heroes. And so we try to get them placed there because everything is so confidential with them.
right.
So
That's good that somebody's focusing on them because, it's a tough job. It's a really tough job. All right, so let's go into P. Let's break
So
that down.
persuade, how do we, if we see all the signs, which if your company wants to do the QPR class, it teaches all the different signs. But once we see the signs, how do we persuade someone to get help? Because the problem is that suicidal people often believe that they cannot be helped. And so they
Right,
may not let you help them. So what do we do to be able to do that for them? Number one, we need to listen to their problems, because their problems it's not suicide. Suicide is what's going to fix all the problems that they have in their life. And so persuading them that they are good enough, that we need to take care of them, that it will pass, that life will not always be like this. Taking them, going with them to go get help is the number one thing you can do, whether that's family, friend, coworker, leaving where you're at and taking them to somewhere safe to get help. If they refuse to go and you know they're in imminent danger, they've confessed to you that they have a plan, they have intent, they have means, and they walk out of wherever you're at, you're not going to tackle them. That's not going to do any good, but we call
right.
911 and we have a check the welfare done on them.
Okay,
Most counties, most states have co-responder units that ride with the sheriff's office or the police department, and that's a clinician, and they go in and their job is to evaluate the individual and get them the help they need. It's not to get them in trouble, it's not to
right.
arrest them, it's to help them.
Did I hear you say earlier that's what you did for a while?
I did for 3 years. Yep.
Wow,
Loved
so
it.
welfare check, somebody calls 911, calls the police, officers grabbing you, and you're jumping in the squad car and you're
Yep.
cruising wherever, apartment complex, trailer park, a home, wherever, maybe a job, and you're identifying this individual, and then you're kind of doing the QPR, huh? Just go up to them.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
So it's like a process, like what to do when you see the risk factors. So as far as persuade, I remember something that we used to say, and my mental health experience is old because I've been doing occupational health and safety for a long time now. So I wonder if this statement is still good as far as the persuasion side. We say, don't choose a permanent solution to like
the
fix
temporary
temporary
problem.
problem. Is that still, a decent thing to say?
It absolutely is, but to be able to help them see that is where the struggle is. Because you got to remember they've got those blinders on and they can't
Right.
see the future, they see the problems.
Right.
Yeah,
Um, do you see it different generationally? Because we deal with a lot of generational psychology in the behavioral safety world, where we talk to, we've learned generations are different. So we approach Gen X versus a baby boomer versus Gen Z, Gen Y. They think and function and talk different, and we have to approach them different. Um, I'm told today that the newer generations, you start busting out facts on them, they it's called fact shaming, and you're making them feel bad because you know knowledge, and are you seeing any different approaches for generations? Is that in the suicide prevention world?
absolutely. I will tell you, I think our younger generation has it right when it comes to mental health. They're much more open, they're much more honest. A lot of times our problem is with the parents because the generation I grew up in was just put a smile on, put your boots on,
Walk it
pull
off.
your, yeah, and go do what you have to do. You'll be fine. There's nothing
Yeah.
wrong with you. And the parents still have the same mentality. And so that's where we get a lot of confrontation from is the parents. But then even the older generation than that, when they're struggling or they've lost their loved ones or whatever it may be, they will tell you, I'm fine. And
Right.
clearly for us, they are not fine, but it's very hard for them to accept the help.
Occupationally, it's such a widespread of ages. You got 18-year-old kids working right next to a 74-year-old person. So, if the approach, the campaigns, if a company was to do a suicide prevention campaign, I think they might maybe look at different language and try to hit everybody, because
Absolutely.
one's not going to get the other one, and one might get the other one. All right, so persuasion. That seems like tough so far. Like questioning, I can do that. I can ask questions. I can see a red flag, a risk factor, an anomaly, a change of behavior, and that'll stick out to me. And I'm a pretty observant person, and then I can ask some questions on that are coming from a position of care versus a confrontation, a confrontive a position. I think I could do that fine. The persuade, I mean, I wish I was a master at that, because my life would be a lot different if I can just get people to do whatever I
Or
tell
what
them
you
to do.
want, right? Yeah, I
Yeah,
agree. The
so
persuasion piece is the
yeah,
hardest.
yeah, that seems challenging, but and I would have, I think, a hard time with the younger folks that aren't responding to logic so much, that are more emotionally driven, because I'm a very logic driven person. If I got them talking a long time and I heard their problem, but before they're done, I'm going to have five different solutions for that problem, you know? And then sometimes when I just like, okay, well, this is what you got to do. Boom, boom. If you don't like that, do this, blah, 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 do this, blah, blah. And they don't feel any better. Didn't like work. There was, I was trying to solve their problem. I didn't persuade them to do
No,
anything.
because
What?
Aaron, they're not looking for you to solve their problem. They're looking for you to listen to them so that they
Okay.
know somebody cares about them. So it's not about solving the problem. It's about being present in the moment and simply listening.
Sounds like a classical guy mistake, you know?
Sometimes I don't want to say
Yeah.
that. I think
Yeah, no,
it's
I
all a
know, but
matter of
it, it,
perspective. But yeah,
it it's always been in the teaching, like, women don't want you to solve the problems, they want you to hear them out. I've heard that 10,000 times in the different realms of psychology, with men and women, stuff like
yeah,
that. So for the other younger generation, you're thinking it might be the same thing. The persuade might not be problem solving. The P isn't necessarily problem solving, it's persuade. And that might take different forms than trying to logically help them work through their problems.
absolutely.
So what tactics do you got for us on the persuasion side?
Well, it really depends on specifically who you're working with and the
Right.
situation around them. It could be that they Maybe it's a older person you're working with and they say to you, I'll go get help if you can get a hold of my daughter or my son or my grandchild. Maybe they
I
just
gotcha.
need somebody safely with them. With a kiddo, it might be, I want to get the help, but I want my best friend to go with me. Like if
Right.
they're asking for somebody to come with and they're giving you permission to make those calls, we make those calls. And if they're not, then we call 911 and we get that check the welfare done. We do what we
So,
have to.
so what I'm hearing is the persuade, once we've confirmed that there's plans, there's means, there's opportunity, like you said, this persuade is different. It's not persuade to not do it. It's persuade to like go to some physical place to get help. Is that what we're
Abs-
talking about?
Absolutely. So if we know all those things that you just said, we've either got to get them to the hospital for an evaluation. Here in Colorado Springs, we have a crisis walk-in center that's open 24 hours a day. We got to get them there. We have to get them somewhere to get that full evaluation done.
Okay, well that makes me feel better because I think I have more success persuading somebody to go to a place than persuading them not to kill themselves.
Right.
Because
Absolutely.
that's a tall order. But you're saying with QPR, that's not really my mission. My mission is get them to a place with experts where it's a safe environment where they're going to have observation and let the pros get in there and use their skills to do the other persuading to not look at this as a viable option.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I'm feeling good about this. Identify some risk factors, you do some questioning, you persuade them to get help, and you got to know where they need to go.
Yeah, that's the
You,
R the refer. Like, where are we referring them to? Don't refer them to a therapist that's not open at midnight when it's
right.
11:30. We have to know where to refer to. And even for those who may not be suicidal, but they're having a lot of depression or a lot of anxiety, we don't have to get them to a hospital right away, but referring them to the appropriate resources is so important.
Right. So like, based upon circumstances, if it's like a now I'm gonna kill myself now, well, okay, maybe we need to go to the ER. But if
Absolutely.
but if it's like I'm just having these thoughts, I'm starting to think about plans, then we might be, and it's midnight, we might say, are you seeing anybody? You should make an appointment, Monday. So
Absolutely.
is that kind of that last process, the
So
R process?
imminent, yeah, imminent danger is the one trigger right there as to whether we take them somewhere or we can give them referrals and they can make an appointment at a later date.
So that's the QPR.
That's QPR.
Nice. And so employees, individuals, they could get this training. And then so you're in Colorado Springs.
I am.
But you said you could do some training over Zoom, over the phone, over other platforms, streamings. So
Yep.
that's
Typically
awesome.
we do Zoom or Teams. Yep.
Nice, nice. That's really cool that you guys do that. And then I think you said a very powerful word earlier, free. Is that
Yes, absolutely. I can do it absolutely free to any company. Absolutely. And I'm very flexible on dates and times, especially if it's another time zone. This information is so important, whatever it takes to get it out there, we are willing to do.
wow. Well, so as we wrap up, I just want to give you an opportunity just to give some how can people get a hold of you? How could people get a hold of other resources that focus on this, either national or local or websites or groups?
Absolutely. So the number one website I will tell you guys to go to is NAMI, NAMI. That's the National Alliance for Mental Illness. And there is usually a chapter in most of the big cities. Amazing group. They have volunteers, a lot of free services for individuals with mental health issues, for families dealing with individuals with mental health and suicide, but a great, great resource is and they're located all over the United States. The other one, you are absolutely okay to email me to request QPR training. My email is robin.schawe at uchealth.org. And again, I can be flexible on dates and times for the training.
Well, Robin, thank you so much for coming on the show and lending your expertise to our listeners and giving those excellent resources. But most importantly, just thanks for stepping up to function inside this realm that most people would shy away from. You're diving into the difficult, deep waters and doing what you can to make a difference in people's life. That's literally life saving. And I know, just like we talked about the first responders having, it's a heavy job. What you're doing is heavy. So for you taking that on your shoulders to help other people, that's just very commendable. Just keep up the good work. Love what you're doing. And once again, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you, Aaron. Have a good day.
All right. Until next time, everybody, stay safe.